Welcome back to another episode of UFC Predictions. It is currently 6:27 p.m. Eastern here, and UFC Newark, UFC ESPN on 5 just ended about a half hour ago. And boy, I know a lot of people going into that card didn't think that it was going to be that exciting. I had fun. I don't know about you guys, but it's been a while since I've done an episode like this. I wanted to do a quick recap of the analysis and predictions video that I released earlier this week, just to kind of see how we did, where we were right, where we were wrong, and just sort of my thoughts on the fights. Overall, we were 5-1 on the main card, so pretty well. And on Tapology, I do all of the fights from top to bottom on the card, and I was 9 of 12. Top to bottom. So I guess I just want to say Colby Covington can fight. Love him or hate him, that boy has a pace that I think is unmatched in the welterweight division. And I think, ironically, maybe Kamaru Usman, who he'll be facing next, is maybe the only other guy in the welterweight division that has that kind of pace and pressure and cardio. So really looking forward to that matchup, maybe coming up here towards the end of the year. But let's take a look at the first fight on the main card and work our way up from there. So the first fight was actually the only one that I got wrong on that card. I'd picked Stosic to come away with a split decision against Enza Chuku. He ended up losing via unanimous decision to Enza Chuku. I actually didn't get to see the first 2 rounds of that fight. I was at an event for a nonprofit that my girlfriend puts on for our wounded warriors and our veterans. And so forgive me for missing the first 2 rounds of that fight. So I really don't know how it played out. All I do know is when I showed up, Stosic was getting a point deducted for an eye poke, and ended up winning the rest of that 3rd round from what I saw. So I'm not sure how the first 2 rounds played out. I did miss that one. I thought that Stosic's experience would be a little bit too much for Enza Chuku in that fight. Turns out I was wrong, but hey, you win some and you lose some. Moving on. But by the way, that Kennedy Enza Chuku guy, as I was saying in my predictions video, that dude has a frame on him. 6'5", 83-inch reach. So going to be exciting to see what he can turn his career into here moving forward in the light heavyweight division. Moving on, Scott Holtzman versus Dong Hyun Ma. Scott Holtzman won via KO in the 2nd round. Let's take a look here. I actually had Scott Holtzman winning via unanimous decision. So going into this fight, I just simply thought that Scott Holtzman was a more well-rounded fighter, and I didn't really see an aspect in that matchup where Ma had the advantage. Turns out he certainly has the advantage when it comes to toughness. So I think my prediction would have been right, that it would have been Scott Holtzman unanimous decision had the doctors not stopped that fight. So Dong Hyun Ma, man, he's one of those guys that is, as they say, too tough for their own good. He was just getting hit with bombs by Scott Holtzman and stayed in there and was swinging hard back. And there was a time, he hit him with, I think it was a left hook that dropped Scott. Scott immediately shot, recovered very well, and put the pressure on Dong and looked really impressive, Scott Holtzman. It's exciting to see. He kind of had that Cowboy Cerrone vibe going on there after the fight, holding up his 15-month-old son. That was a pretty picture, and it seems like he's fighting for something more now than just himself. And I always like that, man. It'll be interesting to see if Scott can keep the momentum up. I know he had a misstep in his last fight against Nick Lentz, but it'll be interesting to see if he can keep this up. He looks really great. He looks to be in phenomenal shape. He's fighting for his son now. We'll see if he can get in sort of the deep waters, have you, for this lightweight division. Next up on the card, though, Trevon Giles versus Gerald Mirs Thoughts. So I called this upset, man. I thought that going into this fight, if you saw my analysis and predictions video, that I thought that Trevon's output wasn't enough on the feet. I knew he had big knockout power, but I just thought that his output wasn't quite enough, and that Gerald, just being a submission expert, Trevon in his last fight lost via submission. He got cracked on the feet, but he did end up losing via submission, and I just thought that Mirs being a black belt, Trevon being a purple belt, that would weigh in his favor. Little did I know that Trevon was going to grapple with him basically the entire fight. I mean, he cracked Gerald with a left hand within the first 20, 30 seconds of the fight, snapped his head back. And I thought, oh boy, Gerald, do not stand up with this guy. I'm screaming at my TV. Stick to the game plan, take him down. But little did I know that Trevon would happily grapple with Gerald for essentially the duration of the fight. And it turned out just kind of how I thought it was going to turn out had that fight gone to the ground. So I had Gerald by a second round submission. Ended up being a third round submission. I know they were talking about how Gerald looks to be in great shape. He switched up his strength and conditioning program, and he did look good. I'm not going to knock a guy after getting a third round submission over a tough opponent, but I don't know how I feel about him in the middleweight division. I don't think there are many guys, in the top 15, let alone the top 10, that he could really hang with. I'd have to give that some more thought, but just as I'm sitting here now, based off of what I saw in that fight, it was going either way. I mean, he was even losing grappling exchanges to Giles, which, you shouldn't do if you're a black belt facing a purple belt. He was losing some of those exchanges, giving up some good dominant positions, but he ended up sinking in the choke, getting the win, and good for him. But, we'll see what happens to Mirs moving forward. The next fight, though, one highly anticipated fight for this card. I knew there weren't that many highly anticipated matchups going into this card, but this was certainly one of them. Out of the lightweight division, Joaquim Neto BJJ Silva versus Nazaret Hakparast. So I had predicted for this fight that Nazaret would get a second round knockout. He indeed got a second round knockout, highly impressive fashion. Silva is no joke, super tough dude. Mentioned on the last video, neither of these guys had ever been stopped before or knocked out before. And I thought that was going to end today, and it certainly did. So in the first round, Nazaret was... he was just feeling him out, man. He wasn't being too aggressive. He was being a little bit more defensive. Silva was more on the attack than Nazaret was. But boy, he was just very, very calculated in his approach to that fight. Showed a ton of mental fighting intelligence in that fight. I mean, being coached by Faris Sahabi and having George St. Pierre in your corner, I mean, how can you not enter into that fight with just a hell of a game plan? And boy, he did. So, had a good first round, clocked him a few good times, took some strikes as well, absorbed some strikes from Silva. But boy, I don't know what they told him in the corner between rounds, but whatever it was, I mean, I'm assuming it was something along the lines of, okay, now's your time to let your hands go, put together a 3-2, something like that, and put it on him, and gosh, it took, 38 seconds or something like that into the second round, dipped his head to the right, big left hand over the top, landed perfectly flush, finished him on the ground. Kudos to Silva for not going out cold to that strike, because I don't know. I know just probably everybody watching this video, and myself definitely included, would be out cold if you took that punch from Nazaret. So he's looking good, man. I was looking at the UFC lightweight rankings right now, just trying to think, because you need to give that guy a top 15 opponent next time. You need to give Nazaret a top 15 opponent. And I was kind of looking between 10 and 15 who you could match him up with. There are guys like Paul Felder, who he's too smart and he's a veteran. He's not going to take a fight against a dangerous opponent like Nazaret, who's behind him like that. But I was thinking maybe somebody like Charles Oliveira, Alex Hernandez. I mean, he just came off of a good win a couple of weeks ago, but I don't know. I think that would be fireworks. Alexander Hernandez against Nazaret Haqparast. Who wouldn't want to see that one? Dan Hooker's looking to get on the card in Australia, and Nazaret said he's looking to fight as soon as maybe October. So how about that card? Dan Hooker versus Nazaret Haqparast. Dan's he's probably looking to face a higher ranked opponent, but with such a short turnaround, who knows who he's going to be able to get to fight him. I know he was exchanging words with Al Iaquinta online, so I don't know. I mean, Al's ranked 6th right now in the lightweight division. Nazaret. Anyway, I don't want to go on about that. There's a lot of thinking to do as to who you could match Nazaret up moving forward. He is certainly a very exciting up-and-coming star, I think, here in the lightweight division. So moving on, we got Jim A10 Miller versus Clay the Carpenter Guida. So my prediction for this fight was a 2nd round submission by Jim Miller. It was a 1st round submission by Jim Miller. So, boy, it lasted 58 seconds, I think it was. And so there's not much to go over here except Clay hit Jim with a big, powerful right that stunned Jim for a second. He got right back up and clocked Clay right back, sunk in the guillotine choke, and that was all she wrote. What I do want to say about this fight is, guys, Herb Dean does not appear to be the referee he once was. I mean, he's a highly respected referee even still to this day, but after, stopping the Robbie Lawler-Ben Askren fight probably too soon, I'm of the opinion that Robbie was not out. I know his hand dropped, but if you go and you look at a different angle on that fight, Robbie with his left hand was actually still working on Ben's leg. I mean, he wasn't doing much, but his left hand, you could tell, was not out. He was firmly grasping Ben's leg, his right hand dropped. I don't know. That's a whole nother video. But Herb Dean, I think, did a poor job with that fight, and I think it messed with him a little bit because in this fight, Clay Guida was clearly out. I'm sitting there on the TV yelling to my girlfriend, he's out, stop the fight. And it took Herb Dean like 3 shakes of the wrist to come to the conclusion that he was in fact out. So I don't know. That's all I really have to say about that fight. Jim and Clay, they both appear to be in great shape. Even, Clay being 37, Jim being 35, they both appear to be in great shape. And I think there's still some more fighting to be done. Certainly from Jim coming off of the W here, but even for Clay, man, that guy's got a great attitude, and it was really cool finally seeing those two matched up against one another. Moving on to the main event, though, Colby Chaos Covington versus Ruthless Robbie Lawler. As I said, love him or hate him, Colby Covington knows how to fight. And he comes with a game plan, and he doesn't back down either. I mean, there were times where they were swinging in the pocket, and Colby wasn't taking a step back. As much power as the Ruthless one possesses, that didn't faze Colby. His cardio is insane. I mean, it's the type of cardio that you would expect out of the flyweight division. And he's a welterweight. And I'm just so impressed with Colby Covington. Disappointed, to say the least, against Robbie Lawler. I know all over the internet, everybody was thinking that not everybody, but many people were saying that Robbie Lawler was going to knock Colby Covington out. He does possess that power. I don't know if that was because they wanted that to happen or they really thought that was going to happen. I was under the impression that, I said in my analysis video when I was making my prediction that Colby's pressure, his cardio, his takedowns, his wrestling was just going to be too much for Robbie Lawler. I thought that if Robbie was going to win the fight, it was going to be by knockout. But I touched on in my predictions video the defensive statistics of Colby Covington. I mentioned that he only gets hit with 2.2 significant strikes per minute, which is not a lot at all. So that includes these hands and kicks as well, 2.2 a minute. I thought that he had pretty great defense, although he does get himself into some questionable positions at times, opens himself up a bit. I thought Robbie was going to have a really hard time getting that one big punch off against Colby, which I thought he was going to need to do to win this fight. And he didn't. And, I don't ever want to say that, man, he didn't give it his all, or, he didn't empty the gas tank, as they say. I don't want to knock a guy for these fighters who are warriors, and I have like the utmost respect for these guys, but it did seem like Colby just overwhelmed Robbie and he could just never find his timing. It seemed like even after round one, when Colby was doing all of the wrestling, all of the squeezes, it seemed like even Robbie was more gassed than Colby was, and Robbie was just defending himself the whole time. He wasn't doing much output. So anyway, man, I'm glad to hear that Robbie said on Monday he's going to get back to work and that he's not done. I didn't think that this would be one of those you lose, you retire sort of moments for Robbie. I mean, this is his comeback after all. But, boy, he's lost 2 in a row in just this comeback. And I don't know, man. I don't know how much he's deadly as ever. He'll always have that knockout power, but he's 37 years old. And I hate seeing these guys that we grow up loving and enjoying fighting. We hate to see him just get a little too old and end up, getting severely hurt inside the octagon. I don't want to see that happen to Robbie Lawler. But Colby Covington, Kamaru Usman coming up probably later this year. That's going to be one hell of a matchup, and I'm really looking forward to putting together an analysis and prediction video for that card. So hope you enjoyed the content. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. And if you enjoyed what you saw, maybe give me a little thumbs up. But exciting card. I had fun. Hope you guys did too. And I hope to see you next time.